I don't remember much about what happened after I left the cabin. I stumbled through the woods, the freezing wind cutting through my clothes, and somehow made it to the road. A passing snowplow driver found me and called for help. When the paramedics arrived, they asked me 1,000 questions, none of which I could answer. How could I? How do you explain something like that? The police investigated the cabin. They found the bodies, or what was left of them, but no trace of the creature. The bloodstains, the ash, the broken barricades, none of it made sense to them. The official report called it an animal attack, though no one could identify what kind of animal could cause such carnage. I didn't argue. Let them think it was a bear or a wolf. The truth was too horrifying to share. Christmas Eve had always been my favorite night of the year. The warm glow of fairy lights reflected in frost-coated windows, the scent of pine needles mingling with cinnamon from the cookies in the oven, it all filled me with a nostalgic joy I couldn't shake. This year though, things felt different, uneasy, and it wasn't just because I was spending it with friends for the first time in years. The snowstorm had started around dusk, the kind of storm that seemed ripped straight from a postcard. By 8 p.m., the world outside had vanished beneath a white shroud, and the howling wind shook the walls of my old cabin in the woods. The power flickered twice, but we were determined to make the best of it. A roaring fire in the hearth, spiked hot chocolates in hand, and the comforting hum of Christmas carols on my Bluetooth speaker were all we needed to feel festive. Or so we thought. There were 5 of us in the cabin. Me, my best friend Claire, her boyfriend Matt, my cousin Ryan, and his girlfriend Elena. The plan was simple: get away from the chaos of the city and spend a quiet Christmas together. We hadn't anticipated the storm, but the isolation only added to the charm, or so we told ourselves. We had just settled around the fire, laughing and exchanging gifts, when the first knock came. It was faint, barely audible over the wind, but distinct enough to make us all pause. We exchanged uneasy glances, and Matt was the first to speak. "Did anyone hear that?" he asked, setting his mug down. "Probably just the wind," Ryan said, though his tone lacked conviction. The knock came again, louder this time. "I'll check," I said, grabbing the poker from the fireplace for good measure. Claire protested, but I waved her off. "It's probably just a tree branch." I approached the door cautiously, my heart thudding in my chest. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but swirling snow. I hesitated, then unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The cold hit me like a slap, stealing my breath. But it wasn't the cold that made me slam the door shut. It was the thing standing at the edge of the porch. A man, at least I thought it was a man, stood motionless, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. His skin was pale as the snow, his eyes wide and unblinking. He wore a threadbare Santa suit, the kind you'd find in a cheap costume shop, but it was soaked through and stained dark around the chest. Blood. Lots of it. "What is it?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. I turned to face the group, my face pale. "Someone's out there," I managed, "but they're not right." The mood in the cabin shifted instantly. Matt stood, grabbing a heavy flashlight, and moved toward the door. "Stay back," he said. "I'll check." "Don't," I started, but he was already unlocking the door. He stepped out onto the porch, shining the flashlight into the storm. The beam barely cut through the swirling snow, but there was no sign of the figure. "It's gone," Matt said, turning back. "Probably just..." Before he could finish, something lunged from the darkness, knocking him to the ground. The flashlight rolled away, its beam illuminating a grotesque figure crouched over Matt, claws raking across his chest. Blood sprayed across the snow as Matt screamed. We froze in horror for a split second before Ryan grabbed the poker from my hand and charged forward. He swung it with all his strength, connecting with the creature's head. It let out an inhuman shriek and retreated into the storm, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Matt was alive, but barely. Deep gashes crisscrossed his chest and his breathing was ragged. We dragged him inside, slamming the door and locking it. Claire pressed a blanket to his wounds, her hands shaking. "What the hell was that?" Elena whispered, her face pale. "I don't know," I said, grabbing my phone. No signal, of course. The storm had knocked out the cell towers. The next few hours were a blur of terror and desperation. Matt's condition worsened, his skin turning clammy and pale. We debated our options, but there was no way to get help, not in this storm. And then, the sounds started. Scratching at the windows, thumps on the roof, low guttural growls that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. We huddled together in the living room, weapons in hand, a poker, a kitchen knife, even a broken chair leg. Claire and I tried to keep everyone calm by talking through strategies. "If we stick together, it can't get to us," I said, though I didn't believe it. Ryan paced back and forth, muttering curses under his breath. "Maybe it's just trying to scare us," Elena suggested. "It could leave if we don't engage." "You think that thing cares about scaring us?" Ryan snapped, pointing to Matt, who groaned weakly from the couch. "It wants us all dead." Around midnight, the power went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. The fire's glow cast flickering shadows on the walls, and every creak of the wood made us jump. Then came the knock. 3 deliberate thuds that rattled the door. "Who's there?" Ryan shouted, his voice cracking. No answer, just the wind. "I'm not waiting around to die," he said, moving toward the door with the poker raised. "Don't!" Claire cried, but it was too late. Ryan yanked the door open and stepped outside. The rest of us rushed to the doorway, watching as he disappeared into the storm, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly. "Ryan!" Elena screamed, but he didn't respond. A blood-curdling scream tore through the night, followed by a sickening crunch. The flashlight fell to the ground, its beam illuminating the snow. Ryan's mangled body lay motionless, his blood staining the white landscape. Standing over him was the creature, its void-like eyes locked onto us. We slammed the door shut, barricading it with furniture. Claire sobbed quietly, clutching Matt's limp hand. He hadn't moved in hours, and we feared the worst. After Ryan's death, Elena refused to sit still. "We can't just wait here," she hissed. "We have to try something. Find the car, signal for help, anything." "Have you lost your mind?" I shot back. "It's out there waiting for us." Elena grabbed the kitchen knife and began pacing. "We don't know what it wants. If we can distract it or lead it away." Claire shook her head. "And sacrifice yourself? That thing dragged Ryan off like he was nothing." We tried to regroup, barricading the windows further and lighting every candle we could find. At one point, Elena thought she saw movement outside. We all froze, staring into the storm through a sliver in the curtains. A shadow darted past, low and fast. "It's circling," I whispered, looking for a way in. Elena eventually couldn't take it anymore. She tied her scarf tightly around her neck and headed toward the window in the kitchen. We tried to stop her, but she was determined. "I'll be fast," she said. "I'll find the car and honk the horn to distract it." Seconds after she slipped out, there was a scream. Claire and I rushed to the window, but all we could see was a dark smear in the snow and Elena's scarf fluttering on a low-hanging branch. The horror was unbearable. Claire's breakdown came swiftly, her voice trembling like the fragile flame she struggled to stoke. "We're going to die," she whispered, her breath visible in the icy air. Her hands shook so badly that the tinder barely caught. "We should have stayed in the city. We should have never came here." I stood beside her, draping a blanket around her shoulders. "Claire, we'll make it," I said, though the life felt like ash in my mouth. My fingers brushed her arm, trying to steady her, when a sound cut through the oppressive silence, a low, deliberate scrape against the back wall of the cabin. Claire knelt beside Matt, her hands pressed against the jagged wound on his chest in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. He was already pale, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The creature's earlier attack had left him broken, but still, he held on, his eyes locked on hers. "It's coming back," Matt rasped, his voice barely audible over the sound of Claire's sobs. I was by the window, watching the shadows shift outside, the firelight flickering as the thing circled the cabin. "We have to block the door again," I shouted, but Matt shook his head weakly. "No, you'll never hold it." His hand trembled as he reached up, gripping Claire's wrist. "Claire, you have to go." "No," she cried, tears streaking her face. "I'm not leaving you." The next crash came louder than before, the door splintering as the creature's claws raked against it. There was no time. Matt's voice turned fierce, a final surge of determination. "You need to live, you hear me? You have to." The creature broke through in a blur of shadow and claws, and in that instant, Matt acted. With a raw scream, he shoved Claire backward, forcing her out of its immediate path as he pushed himself upright. "Come on, you bastard!" Matt roared, staggering to his feet, his body blocking the creature's path to Claire. He swung the broken chair leg with every ounce of strength he had left. It was enough to stagger the beast, if only for a moment, but not enough to stop it. The creature lunged, its claws slicing through him, ripping him apart as he stood his ground. Claire screamed, scrambling to her feet, but the sight of Matt's lifeless body brought her to her knees. "Run, Claire!" I shouted, though I already knew she wouldn't. Instead, she grabbed the fire poker and charged the creature with a feral cry, her grief-fueled desperation driving her forward. The beast turned, its glowing eyes narrowing, and swiped at her with brutal precision. The poker clattered to the floor near me as Claire crumpled beside Matt, her blood pooling beneath her. The creature hovered over their bodies, whispering guttural words I could not understand. I came out of my shock, picked up the poker, and ran desperately looking for a place to hide. The creature toyed with me, scratching at the walls. It was only a matter of time before it came for me. I armed myself with the knife and the poker, barricading myself in the bathroom. The storm outside raged on, and I could hear the creature moving through the cabin, searching. When it found me, it didn't lunge right away. It just stood there, its freakish smile stretching impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth. "Merry Christmas," it rasped, the words twisted and grating like nails dragged slowly across a chalkboard. The room seemed to close in as the creature tilted its head, savoring the moment. Then, without warning, it lunged. I barely dodged its first swipe, the air crackling with the force of its strike. My heart thundered as I lashed out, the knife connecting with a sickening squelch. Black ichor sprayed across the walls, but the creature only laughed. It came at me again, faster this time, its claws raking my arm. Pain flared, but I gritted my teeth and drove the knife deeper into its side. It howled, the sound echoing like a banshee's wail, but it didn't fall. I kicked at its legs, sending it sprawling onto the blood-slick floor. For a moment, it struggled to rise, its glowing eyes locked onto mine, burning with malice. "Merry Christmas," it rasped once more as it gathered itself ready to strike again. I held the poker behind my back, hiding it from its sight. It lunged at me one final time. It grabbed me from my neck and lifted me up into the air with ease. I stared into its glowing eyes, and with one swift motion, I drove the poker through its chest. It released its grip on me, staggered, and fell backwards. Then, I drove the poker through its chest once more, this time connecting with its heart. Its scream split the air as its body convulsed, black ichor boiling and hissing as it melted into the floor. The room fell silent, except for my ragged breathing. All that remained of the creature was a smear of ash swirling faintly in the draft. The cabin was silent. My friends, my cousin, they were all gone, their blood staining the snow and walls. I staggered outside, the first light of dawn breaking through the storm. The world was eerily still, the snow glistening like a cruel mockery of peace. On the porch, scrawled in blood, were the words, "Merry Christmas." I turned and walked away, leaving the cabin behind, but I knew I would never escape what happened there. Christmas Eve would forever be the worst night of my life.